What's going on, everybody? Khalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the TCL 30Z. So we're going to be taking a look at this phone and going over what kind of value it provides to help you decide whether or not it's the right phone for you. So with that being said, let's get started. Now with this phone, we're getting a 6.1 inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 282, and an aspect ratio of 19.5 by 9. So this display, for what it is actually not bad at all. As far as the quality goes, despite only being a 720p LCD display, it is definitely really good, the colors look great, and it's surprisingly bright. Now TCL of course started out making TVs and they put that same technology into their phones, and you can really tell by the quality here. Sure, it's not a fancy AMOLED with a 1080p resolution, but if you're doing more basic content consumption like streaming YouTube videos and stuff like that, then it will get the job done just fine. As far as the size goes, at 6.1 inches, sure, it's not the largest display out there, but it is decently large. So when you're streaming videos, looking at photos, playing games, all that kind of stuff, you are going to get a pretty good experience here. As far as the dimensions go, with an aspect ratio of 19.5 by 9, we're getting a decently tall and narrow form factor. Now sure, it's not the best. There are plenty of phones out there, even in this price range, that have dimensions of 20 by 9 and even 20.5 by 9, and those are much better. But at the same time, I have definitely seen worse. And if you're looking at things in landscape mode, for example, or doing something like reading or web browsing, again, for a more entry-level phone like this, you are going to get a pretty good experience overall. Now for this storage, this phone is getting 32GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so not too great. Unfortunately, 32GB is pretty much the norm for a phone in this price range, and in my opinion, for any phone for that matter, this is just not enough. In this day and age, stuff like apps, cookies from web browsing, and even just the system itself is taking up more and more space, so it's even more important now than ever to have more storage on your phone, and with only 32GB, we're really not getting that. Now that being said, we do at least get microSD card expansion, so if you have a bunch of stuff like photos and videos, maybe music, you can offload a lot of that stuff onto a microSD card, but in general, it is better to have a little bit more storage on the phone itself, and although there aren't too many entry-level phones that have 64GB, it definitely would be a nice thing to see. To give you an idea of what the storage actually looks like on this phone, as you can see right here, I am taking up 23GB right now, and I really don't have a whole lot on this phone, just the normal apps you might use on a daily basis, stuff like social media, a couple streaming platforms here and there, and a few mobile games, and as you can see, even that is really taking up quite a bit of space. And for that matter, despite all this, the system is taking up even more space at 13GB, so really, since obviously we can't avoid using the system, we really only have 19GB available for everything else. So unless you're really using this phone for only the absolute basics, like sending text messages, making calls, stuff like that, then you'll probably be better off with a phone that has more storage. Now unfortunately, this phone does not have a fingerprint scanner, but at least we get Face Unlock, which is definitely a nice thing to see, especially considering lots of phones in this price range don't even have that. Now today in 2022, I feel like every phone should at least have a fingerprint scanner, but again, at least we have Face Unlock, so we get one other option besides having to put in your PIN. But that being said, let's go ahead and give Face Unlock a try and see how well it works. There we go, one more time. And there we go. I don't know how well you could see that, but Face Unlock is really fast and responsive, no issues whatsoever. So again, although we don't have a fingerprint scanner, which I personally prefer, and I feel like most people like better as well, at least we do not only have Face Unlock, but it works really well. So if you don't want to put in a PIN or a password, then the Face Unlock is a nice option to have. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, for the front facing camera, we got a water drop notch, and this camera is 5 megapixels. Then on the back, we got one single camera, and this camera is 8 megapixels. So as far as features go, as you can see, this phone doesn't really have a whole lot. No ultra wide camera, no macro camera, not even a depth sensor. Although I will say portrait mode does actually work, which was pretty surprising. But in general, if you're taking lots of photos and you want a wider variety of features, then unfortunately this phone is probably not going to be a very good choice. And in addition to this, I was really not impressed with the photo quality either. So here's a photo taken with the rear camera. I'm really going to let this quality speak for itself. It's not really the best. Maybe if you're using your camera for Snapchat, something like that, where the quality really doesn't matter, then it should be okay. But honestly, I wouldn't even use this camera for social media. If you're posting pictures on Instagram or something like that, sure, you don't need DSLR quality, but you at least want it to be decent. And in my opinion, even for just being a super entry-level phone, I don't know that I would even consider this quality decent. Now, sure, I have actually seen worse, but there are still plenty of phones in this general price range that can at least take passable photos. But still, all the same, if you're trying to take photos you actually want to keep for something, then I can't really recommend this phone for that, because not only does the camera have pretty much no features, but the quality is also not there either. Now here's a photo taken with the front-facing camera, same kind of thing. This photo looks super overexposed, even though it was in pretty decent lighting, but to be fair, portrait mode actually does work, which I was not expecting with this phone. But again, same principle applies. If you're taking photos for something like Snapchat where the quality really doesn't matter, then this phone should at least get the job done. But if you're taking photos you actually want to keep, whether it's for social media or something else, then I would definitely go for a phone with a better camera. Now internally with this phone, we're getting 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio 822 processor. Now I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on it, and it came back with a single core score of 166 and a multi-core score of 575. Now by itself, these numbers might not mean a whole lot to you, so what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and comparing your scores to these to see whether or not this phone would be an upgrade for you. But I'm guessing it's probably not, because this is really not a very fast phone. In general, this phone is not meant for very heavy use, so if you're doing anything beyond sending text messages, making calls, and some light web browsing and social media use, then you're probably going to want to go for a device with a better processor. But that being said, if you really are just using your phone for the basics and nothing else, then it should be okay. Now for the battery, this phone has a 3000 mAh battery, so it's not terrible, but it's definitely not great either. If you're not using your phone too heavily, you'll probably at least last throughout the day without having to charge it, but at the same time, if battery life is a priority for you, maybe you're on the go a lot and you're not always around a charger, in that case you're probably going to be better off going for a phone with a better battery, like for example the Motorola Moto G Power 2021. That phone, to be perfectly honest, is really not that much more expensive than this, and it has a 5000 mAh battery, which is going to be like night and day between this phone as far as battery life is concerned. So if you really want a phone with a good battery, even in this general price range, they are out there, but if you don't really care a whole lot about battery, then this phone should at least be passable. And as far as software goes, this phone does have Android 12, which is one pretty surprisingly impressive thing about it, because in this price range, although not every phone has an older software, entry-level phones like this do tend to have older versions of Android. So although Android 12 is not going to be the newest version of Android for long, since Android 13 is really right around the corner, seeing that this phone currently does have the latest version of Android, considering its price range, is definitely a nice thing about it. Now of course, if having the latest versions of Android as they come out is important to you, you're probably not going to want a lower end phone like this anyway, but if you want at least the best software you can get when you get the phone, then again, seeing that the TCL 30Z does have Android 12, this will be a nice benefit. Now there's no NFC with this phone, which is not very surprising. Very few phones in this specific price range have it, so if you do want to make mobile contactless payments, unfortunately you won't be able to with this phone. But now that we've gone over some of the specs and features, let's take a closer look at the device itself. So on the left side here, we got nothing. On the bottom, we got the microphone, a micro USB port, which I'm not too happy about, and the speaker. Now this is one kind of common thing I've seen with these entry-level phones. A lot of them do unfortunately have micro USB, and since USB-C, at least in the US, is pretty much the standard, this can definitely cause problems if you want accessories and stuff like that, so definitely keep this in mind. Now on the right side, pretty simple, we got the power key, volume down, volume up. On the top of the phone, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack and the noise cancelling microphone. On the back, we got our camera module and our flash. TCL logo right here, Cricket at the bottom, and that's pretty much it. Now one interesting thing about this phone that's kind of common in lower end phones is that it actually has a removable battery. Now I personally really don't like this, but I know some people out there actually do, because one benefit of this, especially considering this phone has a relatively small battery, is that when the battery wears out, instead of replacing the whole phone, you can just get a new battery and it should be good to go. But again, when it comes to removable batteries, I personally don't like this at all. It makes the phone feel so much more flimsy. And as far as the actual build quality of this phone goes, the phone is made pretty much entirely of plastic, and it doesn't even feel like very good plastic. It's just really cheap, and even though for a phone in this price range, you can't really expect anything premium, these materials just don't feel very good at all, and the phone also has barely any weight to it either. But in conclusion, my general thoughts about the TCL 30Z. Overall, I don't really think this phone is any different from any other phone in this price range, pretty much just a generic entry-level phone, maybe with a slightly worse camera than average. But that being said, one thing I do particularly like about this phone is the display. Sure, it's not the largest or highest quality thing out there, but for an entry-level phone, I do think it looks really good, especially those colors, and the brightness is great as well. So if you're consuming a lot of content, like streaming videos, reading, playing games, looking at photos, then despite pretty much everything else about this phone being either average or below below average for its price range, I do think for what it is, the display is really good, and if you're just doing more basic content consumption, then it will get the job done. But this concludes my review of the TCL 30Z. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, but as always, I will see you in the next video.